Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group. This episode was recorded live from Autodesk University in Nashville, Tennessee, where the brightest minds in construction, design, and technology came together to shape the future. Over the course of AU, we talked with industry leaders, innovators, and the change makers about the trends, tools, and ideas driving digital transformation in our great industry. So settle in as we explore how to model the future of construction innovation. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group. We are recording live from Autodesk University here in Nashville, Tennessee, and excited to be joined by Jessica. Thanks so much for taking the time to come on in.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
So let's start for those listening. If you can give a little bit of background on kind of who you are, your role, and
Sure.
what your company is.
Yeah, so my name is Jessica, obviously. I am one of two directors of design technology for a firm called Hart Howerton, in a bi-coastal firm called Hart Howerton, New York and San Francisco. We have several smaller offices sort of scattered around the country. And the firm is a multidisciplinary firm. So it's architecture, landscape architecture, planning, and interiors, kind of all under one roof. And it's an interesting place to work. We work on a lot of luxury hospitality and residential projects on large, very complex sites, lots of buildings. So it's been an interesting time working there.
Yeah.
Lots of cool stuff.
That's awesome. How's your AU experience been so far this week?
It's been great. Lots of cool things to see and interesting new tools to investigate. And then classes are great. It's always fun to go to the keynotes and things to sort of see what's coming down the pike. And the AEC Futures one is also a big one that Harris and I both like to go to as well, because it's really good for us to kind of understand what we need to anticipate for the coming years, so we're not static.
Any big takeaways so far from either the keynotes or any of the classes that
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting for us to see that there's a lot being invested into Forma and how Forma is turning into this platform that's going to be this sort of combination of a bunch of different tools. I'm very hopeful that the actual Forma tool itself starts to become more compatible with what we do at the firm, because it's a really powerful tool. And the major stumbling block for us right now is that the area that you can bring in from Forma is a little bit too small for us to use, because 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers is significantly, it's like a corner of one of our sites, so it's like not super useful for us at the moment. But we've been talking about it's also interesting too to me because like a lot of the conversations that tend to come out of this event between myself and my team lead to solutions, and sometimes lead to solutions to deal with things like that kind of problem. Like, do we need to kind of create some sort of tiling system where if we have a bigger site, but we only have access to these smaller areas, where we sort of tile these pieces of site back into our model. So I think that's one of the things that I find to be the biggest outcome of these conference every year.
Yeah. Interesting. And you got to teach a class today. What's about that? What was the topic on it?
The title was Topo and Tribulations, the Battle of Topo Surface versus Topo Solid.
Twister.
And it kind of came about because last year and the year before last, I went to the Inside the Factory event that's run by Autodesk, where it's like a beta testing event for the upcoming versions of Revit. And one of the things I got to test out when I was at those events was the new features of the Topo Solid tools. And I was really excited about them. But the problem was that the current version of the Topo Solids that were actually active in Revit at the time were missing those features. So our landscape teams that were trying to move into later versions of Revit couldn't work in the same way that they had for years in the Topo Surface tool, because there was stuff missing, some stuff didn't behave the same way. It's just like a whole slew of problems. So I submitted this talk because I think it's important to have the conversation and to acknowledge hey, this tool has a lot of promise and it's a lot of power, but it doesn't really do right now what we need it to do to be able to work fluidly with it for large sites, for large complicated sites like what we work with. But as I was writing the presentation, I was getting kind of bored. Well, because site modeling in Revit is not the most exciting thing on the face. It's a little dry, right? But I was also playing a couple of different video games. The big one was Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which is a really, really gorgeous, weirdly emotionally affecting Japanese JRPG, but set in a French context. And I was like, I wonder if I could present this inside the framework of Dungeons and Dragons, RPG, fantasy, Tolkien kind of adventure, we're going to go on a quest. And so that's how I structured the presentation, is that the pain points we were facing were monsters, and then the solutions we were coming up with to get past those pain points were heroes, and then we had like some boss fights, and then some solutions, and some future looking things that we're doing. So it was cool. I think it went pretty well. It was fun for me.
Yeah.
Got some good feedback.
Awesome.
One person actually said it was the best presentation he's ever seen. So that was very affirming.
I love that. What a way to go about it too, to make it a drier topic.
30 in the morning on the last day of the conference. I was like, I know myself. I was like, I wouldn't want to sit through a dry presentation at that time. So,
That's awesome. So what were some of the big monsters that you had your attendees face in that?
So two of the big ones, there are three, four really big ones for me that are like the ones that I would really love to see get fully resolved. One is one that I was calling the Point-Limit Basilisk, which is related to the fact that in Revit 2024 and 2025, there is a 10,000 point limit to a toposolid. You could have multiple toposolids. It's not per project, it's per specific toposolid. That basically made it so that like if we wanted to have one contiguous toposolid for our site, we couldn't really do it because that point limit made it so that the contour accuracy was not very good. So that was fixed in Revit 2026 because Autodesk introduced the ability to adjust the point limit via the INI file. So you can now say, okay, I want 50,000 points for this toposolid or whatever. That's what I want my point limit to be. Allow you to have more points in your toposolid. So that's a big one for us. But again, if your project's in 2024, 2025, that's not available to you. So it only is like the latter versions that have some of these advancements. That one's big. There's one that I called the Copy Bane Imp, which is the representative of the fact that in the early versions of the toposolid tool, you couldn't copy paste points, sub-element points within a toposolid. And then he's got two representations. He's that, but also the fact that if you copy a toposolid from one model to another model, regardless of whether or not they share the origin and coordinate system, it flattens the toposolid out. So you lose all the adjustments you made to it. Useless, right? Kind of a problem, right? So there's that one. And then there's the Merge Hydra, which is the fact that you can't merge two toposolids together, which you used to be able to do with toposurface. And I was going to give you a fourth, but I'm blanking out what it was. So we'll just go with those three.
The top three is good. Awesome. Very cool. So like branching out kind of further into the general workflow and AEC aspect of it. What are some of the big challenges that you guys are coming across right now?
There are a few different things that I think that we are struggling. We kind of struggle with a lot. One is like updating our tools consistently. I know that this is something that Autodesk is working on, a solution through the admin portal to try and figure out if maybe that's gonna, if we can like control our updates from the admin portal instead of having to rely on users to like update their own stuff via Access. Because like 9 times out of 10, people are just like not gonna do that, or they don't even know it. Like I have users that have been using Revit for like years who I'm like, oh, can you check your updates? And they're like, oh, how do I do that? And I'm like, go to Access, you pull it up, and you check if you have an update. And then if you do, you install it. Easy, right? But that kind of whole thing, that kind of thing, I think like globally in software tends to be something that we struggle with is how do we get things updated in a timely fashion so that we don't wind up with errors and that kind of stuff. Model size is something that we struggle with a lot because like I said, big sites, big models, we often will have, something that's like 100 acres of site with like 30, 40 buildings scattered across it. So that kind of tends to become a thing. And then collaboration also, I think, is a thing that could improve for everybody because we're working on this in this hub where we all have access to the same information. Not all the teams are necessarily working in the same tool. And so we're having to figure out how to like get somebody's information if they're working in like, CAD or SketchUp or whatever into Revit and make sure that everything's talking to each other and everybody is talking to each other as well. So I think that's a big one. And skill sets. I would say there's like a big skill level push that we're trying to kind of get everybody like closer to the same level across the firm because a lot of the time you'll have some users that are advanced and you'll have some users that are very much not advanced. While we recognize that not everybody's going to be at the same level all the time, there is sort of a need for there to be some sort of average that is, let's say it's like a 1 to 10 scale. Like everybody kind of needs to be sitting at a 6 or a 7, not at a 3 or 4.
Right,
and getting people up to that 6 or 7 is not always an easy thing to do.
So one of the thread lines that I see in all of those is the communication aspect of it and how have good communication. Any advice there for firms?
Talk to each other. It's so dumb, but like, it's one of those things. It's like, and share data. Like the thing that I think we're all discovering right now is that like data is a common connector for everybody in all these different hubs. And the more that you're able to kind of like share that information and help educate each other and upskill each other, the better everybody will be at using the technology. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, one of the things I did at the end of my presentation today is like we had done a bunch of research over the summer about these TopoSolid workflows and TopoSurface workflows, topography workflows. Instead of being like, we're not going to share that with anybody, we made a cleaned up version of the grid and we shared it with everybody who attended the class because, you know, we think it's important that people understand that like, hey, you don't only have to use this one workflow, right? And so I think that if there's the communication between teams and between individuals within a firm, but then I think there's also also an opportunity that we have right now as an industry to better share information with each other to improve us all, right?
Yeah, we don't have to be as protective about the
exactly.
data.
And I think we don't have to be so precious about it, right? We're all trying to do the same stuff. A window is a window, a door is a door, you know, like a wall is a wall. Like there's only there are certain ways that Revit, specifically Revit, like processes that information. And there are only so many ways that you can do that stuff, right? So like, you know, my windows in my firm are probably not all that different from like the windows at like DLR Group or whatever, right? Yeah. Like they all are constructed kind of the same way. So if like we can kind of learn from each other, like what's working well for us, then I think we would all benefit from that. Like I would love to get together, and I'm going to say this on the podcast because maybe somebody will hear it, but I would love to get together like a group of people who are like DT leadership who talk to each other and share what we're working on that is working well for us. Because I think if we start to share that knowledge, everybody benefits, you know?
Yeah. We need to create the Fellowship of the Ring. I was thinking when you were talking, the image that popped into my head was Gollum and
precious. Yeah,
we don't have to do that with data. We
can, like
don't treat it like the Ring of Power.
Yeah, like let's not. Let's get out of there and like, you know, go on a quest together. I think it would be beneficial to everybody.
I like it. So we're in the Great Tech booth. I know you've been a partner with Microsoft. It's now part of Great Tech as well. Talk to me about what that partnership has been like.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft has been really great for us. We also have ID8, so we can get to that later. But Microsoft has been really great for us in a variety of ways, partly because of the partnership in how we manage our licensing and and keeping us up to date on like what to expect with new licensing changes and helping us to negotiate good licensing decisions. For example, recently we found out that if we bought a new Autodesk tool, our current license with Autodesk would be extended by 2 years. Jeremy at Great Tech helped us to figure out so we bought a few licenses of Build, which we will use, which will be great. And that helped us to extend our contract for another 2 years. So now we don't have to negotiate it until 2028, which made our CFO very happy. So that kind of stuff. But then there's also just support, like immediate support for projects and for the tools and things like that. Like we love Roger at formerly of Microsoft, now Great Tech.
Very common sentiment. I hear that all the time.
He's literally the best. We love him. We love like spending time with him. We also just like, he's always incredibly helpful to us. I have a lot of respect for him. And he has really kind of helped us to troubleshoot something on more than one occasion that has solved a problem for us that we needed immediate assistance with. And he's great. So, But yeah, like that's the kind of stuff I think that we benefit from with this group. It's super helpful for us. Most of the time we can figure it out ourselves, but sometimes if we can't figure it out ourselves, then we navigate to you guys and you help us figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Nice. So you mentioned about ID8 as well too.
Oh
what kind of sparked the
game changer
need for a tool like ID8?
So ID8 is really great because it's got a huge variety of sort of like groups of tools that have been super useful for us. I remember back when Harrison, who's my counterpart in California, joined the firm, the first AU we went to after that, he dragged me to the ID8 booth and he was like, you need to see this, because I had been doing model management manually for years. I had created some Dynamo scripts to do some stuff for me so that I wasn't having to do everything like piece by piece. Yeah. And I can't remember who it was who showed us ID8 at that particular point in time. It was a young woman, and she was like, she showed us the model explorer, and she showed us BIM link, and she showed us the view setup tool and the sheet alignment tool, and I was like, I'm sold. Like, so all this stuff is stuff that honestly, frankly, probably should be built into the tools themselves. Quiet. But they're not. So the fact that Ideate has built these tools for us so that we don't have to sit there and spend, 3 hours aligning our plan views from sheet to sheet takes literally 30 seconds. Like, the amount of times, and that I can like open up a model with all of my work sets closed and still open up Explorer and see everything that's in the model. And if there's a problem child work set, I can like isolate that work set and figure out what's on that work set that's causing the issue. Lo and behold, we can solve problems in so much faster than we used to be able to. Also, Style Manager is a godsend as well, because the amount of times people bring CAD into files and I don't know that they're bringing CAD into files, and then we wind up with imported line styles or line patterns, and I can get rid of them all with Ideate. Amazing. One of the best tools we have by far.
That's awesome. You did a great job of ticking through every single tool there too.
I use it all the time, like literally several times a day, every day.
That's awesome. What was the onboarding and implementation? Sometimes with tools, it can be a heavy process. But what was that like?
Well, my team, the DT team, sits down with every project team that is actively using Revit. We sit down with them once a week and we do a weekly DT check-in. So when we brought Ideate on board, we did a presentation. I think we might have actually had Ideate present at some point. I think Glynis came in and presented for us at one point. But anyway, we did a presentation. And then additionally, when we are in those calls with the teams, we always remind them like, hey, by the way, reminder, you have this tool that you can use to navigate your model and to find problems in your model a lot more easily than you would if you were trying to nitpick it yourself, right? So like, use it. It's here for we have it so that you can improve your workflows. And those weekly check-ins have really been helpful to maintaining that kind of continued communication of like, make sure you're using the tool that we bought for you.
Yeah. Has there been a specific project that you can think of that was like, oh yeah, this really kind of came in clutch for it?
There are a couple. I don't know if I can say the names publicly, but there was like, I'll give one. There was like a beach resort project where we had a user who had been trying to do like a tiling layout for a courtyard. And bless her heart, she's a really smart lady, but she had brought in a CAD file and exploded it to get the line work. And I didn't know about it until after the fact. So I opened up that model at one point and it had like 6,000 imported line patterns or something. And Ideate made it, people who may not know this, like Revit does not natively have a way to like in bulk delete line patterns or line styles, right? You have to do them one by one. So if you haven't,
6,000.
Oh my God, yeah. So the nice thing with Ideate was that like I was able to pull it up in the Style Manager, grab a bunch of stuff, delete it, and I still had to do it in chunks because 6,000 is a lot of line patterns. But I was able to delete all the stuff that wasn't being used, and their model started to run because like all that background data that like clogs up the works. Mm-hmm. It makes the model run slower. So the cleaner you can get these models to run, the better off you're going to be. Yeah. So that's one. And then there was another one where there was a huge error that was making it so that nobody could open the model and they couldn't figure out what work set it was on. So I opened up the model with all the work sets turned off and then opened up the work sets one by one and was able to isolate the work set that was the problem work set, figured out I was able to use the Model Explorer to sort by work set, figured out which stuff was on the work set, and I found the Revit family that was causing the error, replaced it with a Revit family that was not causing any errors, and then everybody was fine.
Nice.
So stuff like that happens all the time.
It's a lifesaver.
Yeah, a huge lifesaver. It's massive.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How do you measure the outcome of success for a particular tool?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I will admit that we're probably not particularly good at like actually doing like ROI studies on the specific tools. But I would say that like so many, if every team that is using Revit is touching Ideate, like if multiple members are touching Ideate and finding it to be a useful addition to their workflow, or any tool really, but like Ideate specifically, I think that probably says all that we need to know. We also have a thing called BIM Beats that we use that helps us to kind of track where people are clicking. And so that has been helping us to kind of see what overall tools people are using a lot. So it tracks like Revit use versus Rhino versus SketchUp versus whatever else. So we know which of our tool set people are most active at.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
What's the next step in your innovation or digital transformation journey?
So I think we gotta, one of the things that I'm interested in doing is like I said, exploring this Forma stuff and how we can leverage that on our projects a little bit more effectively. I know we can't get around the 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer, 4 kilometer square issue right now, but seeing if we can tile things instead of having to just have that one contiguous site. Like maybe we can do a tile of different toposolids that are like next to each other in a model, or like can we figure out like, okay, this is the central tile, and then everything else outside of that can have a little bit lower resolution. Like maybe that's the trick. But being able to figure out how to leverage Forma effectively, I think is going to be a big one for us for sure.
Interesting. As we start to wrap up, a couple of rapid fire questions
Sure,
for
hit
you.
me.
Well, the tagline for Great Tech is modeling the future.
Mhm.
What does that mean and look like to you?
I think that modeling the future is going to be really dependent on like the collaboration, the coordination, all that kind of stuff. Because I think the more that Autodesk kind of creates these hubs where it's intended to go from like concept all the way through CA and full build, the more that we're going to need to understand about how that coordination and collaboration can be used most effectively. I think that a lot of times we're just kind of using it as sort of like a graphic representation kind of thing, and it would be great for I would love to see us use it more as like real collaboration, like model clash detection, like like analytics, all that kind of stuff. Like can we be using Insight a little bit more effectively if we're using Forma to gain better ideas about like our wind studies and our solar studies and all that kind of stuff. I would love to see more adoption in that realm for us.
Nice. What does innovation mean to you?
Wow, I don't think I've ever been asked that question. I think innovation to me is thinking like understanding the rules, but understanding how to break the rules in a way that changes the rule for the better.
I like that. And change the
Yeah,
rule.
break the
I like
rule,
that.
change the rule for the better.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
How do people connect with you or find out more information?
Yeah. So, if you are here at AU, you can access my info via the app. My email is on there along with my LinkedIn. But if you're not here at AU, my LinkedIn is at JBM-DT. JBM are my initials. You can also find me on Instagram, but really that's just pictures of dogs and baking products.
Sure, amazing.
And so the occasional singing video. So probably not particularly useful for the architecture part of my career, but you're welcome to it if you want.
You go, hey, we're in Nashville though, so you got singing videos there.
I did do karaoke the other night. That was fun.
Nice, very nice. Final question for you: if I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing. What would you pick to innovate?
I would pick to innovate something that one of the partners in my firm has been asking for a long time, which is is there a one button solution for doing early stage concept design of a hotel, like a multi-level hotel, using our specific needs from unit design and stuff like that to drive what the design is doing.
Yeah. Nice.
That'd be amazing.
Jessica, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show today. This was awesome.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you guys for asking me to come. This is fun. And I'm looking forward to, future collaborations with you guys.
Likewise.
All right.
Awesome. That's a wrap. And now it's time for my Todd takes from this episode. First take: creativity unlocks the full value of tools. The opportunity comes when teams think creatively about how to adapt tools to their workflows, whether that's reimagining site modeling, tiling data, or inventing new approaches. When technology and ingenuity work together, even the toughest constraints become opportunities for innovation. Second take: share the map. Open data is greater than precious secrets. Progress accelerates when teams talk early, share data, and swap playbooks. Jessica's Fellowship of Leaders mindset, publishing cleaned workflows, comparing what works, and learning on partners and tools like Ideate, turns isolated fixes into industry improvements. Collaboration beats siloed genius every time. And finally, new tech needs new habits. Adoption sticks when you pair tools with clear processes and upskilling. Weekly check-ins, consistent updates, baseline skills, and model hygiene turn change fatigue into momentum. Innovation, as Jessica puts it, is knowing the rules and breaking them for the better. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our sponsor, Great Tech Group, at ASTI.com for more information. You can listen to this podcast anytime by simply going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out our website, bridgingthegappod.com. As always, I'm Todd Wyant, thanking you for joining the conversation to model the future on the Bridging the Gap podcast. keep innovating.